Okay, good afternoon, everyone. Sorry for the delay. We'll call to order the special council meeting. Can I get an adoption of the agenda for May 19th, special council meeting? Tony, Fred, yeah, all in favor? Carried. And Daryl, could you just take 3.1, please?
Sure. Thank you, Your Worship. So this is the renewal of the declaration of the state of local emergency. So we have been doing 7-day souls, and 10 days ago, almost 2 weeks ago, the province did pass you can do a soul for up to 90 days. It actually reached there was ascension late the week before. However, they said that it was only, and they actually grandfathered everyone, provided you did your soul on May the 12th or later. We did ours on May the 11th. So if we'd like another renewal of a soul, and what we did is we tied it to a council meeting, proposed council meeting date in August. We can cancel it anytime we want to, but the thought would be is if we want to continue on, then we need to we would renew the soul at this point for, I believe it's 84 days.
Okay, can I get a motion on the floor, please? Tom?
I move that Council renew the declaration of the state of local emergency for 1,200 hours on May 19th, 2020 to August 11th, 2020 due to the COVID-19 pandemic.
Seconder, Fred, comments? Lisa?
Out of curiosity, do we know how many municipalities in Alberta are still under a state of local emergency?
As of this morning, there were 32 municipalities and an additional 33 Aboriginal communities.
Okay. Thanks.
Anybody else? Fred, go ahead.
Could you can you explain what would have us remove ourselves from a state of emergency? What would have to change from this point on?
I think realistically, one of the things would be the advancement to stage 2, and also seeing a continued low to non-existent number of cases. If we suddenly had a bit of a spike, then I think that's where we would keep it. But if we continue to see a low number, then I would say that we would remove it at that point. We're looking at stage 2. I mean, who knows? Flip a coin, but sometime in later June, mid to late June. So that could change. Probably will change 10 times. But that would be a good indication on my part.
Tom?
Don't want to be doom and gloom, but we are in fairly close proximity to a city that has a big problem with COVID. And if it's any indication, this last weekend, half of the city of Calgary, I think, came to Drumheller. So I don't think we have a choice right now until it really calms down. And I mean, we're in close proximity to Brooks as well, when you think about it. So I think we still have to be very vigilant. I think we have to be on our toes and fighting this thing to keep ahead of it. So I'm certainly still in favor of the state of local emergency for now.
And this, sorry, just to interrupt this part, I guess, your question. The state of local emergency doesn't mean that we're going to have, all the resources that we had a month ago, but it gives us the ability to ramp up at a moment's notice if we need to, versus coming back to council to say, hey, by the way, we need to do something because of an outbreak. So it gives us that flexibility in our back pocket to be able to do something on a moment's notice, but it doesn't necessarily mean we're going to do it or continue to do it.
Did you have some? Anybody else? All in favor? Carried. Okay, can I get a motion to adjourn this meeting? Tony? Christine? All in favor? Carried. Okay, so that's close of the special meeting. Now I'm going to call the Committee of the Whole meeting to order. And I just want to just remind everybody, I said last week that it's National Public Works Week, and just wanted to just send a shout out to our Public Works Department for everything they do. And they've been through a lot through this COVID-19, and they've done incredible things. So just way to go, guys. Thank you for all your guys and gals. Thank you for all you're doing and keeping our community safe. So I would like now to move on to reports from administration. FCSS, April, do you want to take over, please?
Thank you. Good evening, Mayor and Council. So I thought this was an opportune time to review FCSS's role, particularly during crises, and seek direction as to our response moving forward. During the course of this evening, we're going to do a really brief review of FCSS and what it's like in Drumheller and some considerations for the future. And then in part 2, we're going to look at what the 2020 priorities were pre-COVID and what they are now, and then seek some direction. And then depending on that direction, we may request have a request for decision next week around counselling, as Councillor Garbutt had mentioned that some time ago, but it obviously depends on how this evening goes. So I guess in this municipality, FCSS department is how we're known, but it's a bit of a misnomer. And so instead, there is language around maybe community development and social planning or similar. And I just want to show this visually, I suppose, to explain. So within the department that I oversee, there are at least, I guess, 3 key business units, one of which is FCSS. Events is also in there. And then there are also programs and activities that are not FCSS and cannot be FCSS. So under here, I've put them under community development. And whilst there are opportunities for synergy between these units, they do have different mandates. I think that clarity is helpful. Okay. Okay, so the next few slides here, part 1, are taken from the FCSS 101 training session that is available to FCSS staff and board members. I'm just going to pause for a second here. There we go. Okay, and so I'm thankful to Ken Dropko, who's the ED for Family and Community Services, and Debbie Wood, who actually prepared this presentation, and this is kind of an abridged version. So, he is. Yeah. He sure is. Okay, so 101 overview. So what is FCSS? I'm hoping that by the end of this presentation, I will have been able to demonstrate that FCSS is not the fluff, which is a way it's been described in the past a few times. I think it's really important that we kind of move away from that language and that understanding. So we'll look a little bit at how FCS works, local delivery, program requirements and eligibility, how it aligns with the ministry. We're going to skip working relationships. We'll do a little bit on facts and figures. So what is it? Okay, so it is unique in Canada. No other province or territory has a similar program. Other provinces have prevention programs for a specific demographic or age group, but none cover the entire lifespan of cradle to grave the way that FCSS does. It was established in '66, and a review in 1981 led to the program as we know it today. Originally, they had talked about naming it Preventative Innovative Social Services until some astute person noticed the inappropriate acronym of PISS. So it is an 80-20 funding split between the province and the municipality. And municipalities and Métis settlements can choose whether or not to participate. Programs are embedded in legislation, and the Act sets out the mandate and requirements for the program. The regulation sets out the parameters for how the program operates and identifies the intended broad outcomes. Principles. So programs must be preventative and address social issues. It recognizes the value and ability of local residents to influence decisions about their needs and priorities. It enhances personal and community growth and potential and fosters and supports innovation and creativity at the local level. I'm just going to scoot all these down so I don't have to be doing 3 things at once. I'm just going to, okay, there we go. So beliefs. FCSS believes that social breakdown can be prevented, or at a minimum, the degree of severity and impact can be reduced. believes that individuals, families, and communities must lead efforts to improve the quality of life in their environment. Governments by themselves should not be relied on to solve social problems, and that people solve problems, and prevention is as much a process as a service. All communities have strengths and problems, and they also have the potential to enhance their strengths and create solutions to their problems. The determination of what is required in what priority should be established by the community itself through a process of citizen involvement. It speaks a lot to volunteerism and states that the community problems are most likely to be solved by working across institutional boundaries. Therefore, cooperation and coordination are essential. FCSS provides various services, but most importantly, through the process of developing these services locally, the program helps reinforce attitudes and values that contribute to healthy individuals, families, and communities. So the focus is increasing protective factors and reducing risk factors or mitigating the impact of those risk factors. So this is a continuum of prevention, and FCSS plays a vital role in the continuum of care, providing universal prevention and early intervention services. The chart speaks to the importance of prevention. If we invest resources in the promotion and prevention end of the spectrum, which is to the left, it is less costly. The further right we go, the greater the cost. So FCSS sits in prevention and touches into early intervention. So there was a study conducted in 2005. I'm not going to read this out, but it is in your email. You do have it, and it's for your consideration and clarity. And also for your review later, should you wish, is just a little bit of greater detail of what primary prevention or universal prevention, and then early intervention, and then crisis management, how they differ. What's in blue is outside of the scope of FCSS completely. We shouldn't be stepping into that area. So in this next section, I'm going to talk about how the program works in terms of funding agreements, local structure, and administration. So FCSS is voluntary. Municipalities that are interested contact the minister requesting to join and passes a local resolution. So we obviously did that in Drumheller quite some time ago. A funding agreement, I'm just going to put all these up. Always go one too far. A funding agreement is established based on the funding model, which considers the population of the municipality with a slight adjustment for median income. This agreement must be reviewed annually, although as of this year, it's now a 3-year contract. Any change, such as leaving the program, requires 6 months' notice to the minister. Population figures are obtained from Municipal Affairs based on completed information from Revenue Canada. So in terms of locally, on an annual basis, the provincial contribution is $234,050, and the municipal contribution is $58,513. And as I expressed, the contract that has been signed is a 2020 to 2022 agreement, a 3-year agreement, with a total provincial contribution of $702,150 and a municipal contribution of $175,538 for a total of $877,688. Sure. So annually, $58,513 from the town, $234,050 from the province. So then, over the course of 3 years, that will be $702,150 from the province, and $175,538 from the town. Okay? All right. Okay. So the structure of FCSS varies from community to community. A municipality may choose to operate their own program, a single program for its residents. This is the most common structure for larger municipalities to smaller towns and summer villages. This is where we are. We're a single program. Or a group of municipalities can join together to form a multi-municipal program. They will have an advisory board. There'll be one rep, at least, from each of those communities. Examples are Starland County, Red Deer, etc. That's how they're set up. And then there are FCSS programs that may choose to partner in an informal way with another program to offer specific services, or they may choose to transfer some or all of their FCSS funding to another FCSS program in return for providing services to their residents. And this is something that we're in discussion with Starland County at the moment in areas such as seniors, youth, and the tax program. Right now, 20% of those that have accessed our tax program, 20% are non-resident this year. They're not all Starland County, but the majority are. Locally, the participating municipality decides how their FCSS program will be administered. And then there are 3 basic structures. So they are an FCSS department. So the municipality sets up an FCSS program or department with an FCSS director and FCSS staff. This is the most common structure. An advisory board appointed by council is usually set up to oversee the program. Community services or other department. So FCSS is part of a larger municipal department that provides other services like social planning for the municipality. This structure is used where budgets are smaller and resources are split, or in cities where it makes sense to combine social service type programs. FCSS staff report to the department manager. Direct municipal management is the third option. It is used by smaller municipalities with smaller budgets. The program is administered by the CAO or FCSS manager, and council is more hands-on in improving grants and funding. An FCSS bylaw is important to have in place to identify clear reporting relationships, terms of reference for advisory boards, and roles or responsibilities. A bylaw is not required when council as a whole is the FCSS board, and there are no members at large. In this case, FCSS funding and programming is generally approved directly through council. However, if council chooses to set up an FCSS board, a bylaw is required under Section 145 of the Municipal Government Act. And this may be something to consider moving forward, and there's a little bit more on that to follow. Okay. So how services are designed and delivered can differ greatly from one municipality to the next, and those approaches is kind of what we're looking at right now. So preventative social services are provided in FCSS communities by direct service delivery or through external grants or a combination of both methods. We're a combination. So this is where you provide some services directly, such as our seniors programming, some of the youth programming, family fun, all of those things. And then we fund other agencies to deliver certain programs. For example, we fund both school boards at this time. I think one thing to mention on that is that in most instances where an FCSS funds externally, they usually put out a call for proposals to the community, and it's often for 3 years worth of funding. We've not historically done that. In fact, last year was actually the first year that we had a contract with our externally funded agents. And in those instances where one is put out, a call for proposals is put out, the FCSS and then the board would consider what are the priorities for your municipality in determining which agencies or programs are funded. We just haven't done it that way. So, municipal responsibilities. FCSS regulation outlines the obligations and responsibilities of municipalities. These are mostly them. The role of council, boards, and the director in terms of FCSS are as follows. Council decides whether to participate in FCSS and authorizes someone, usually the CAO, to sign the agreement. They're accountable to the province for its program operations. They approve the annual FCSS budget and appointees to the advisory committee or board. They take guidance from the board and the FCSS director. If operating under the direct municipal management structure, council approves external grants. The board works with the FCSS director to develop an annual FCSS budget and program planning for council's approval. They may develop policy, they may approve grant applications either in principle, or they may have vested authority to do so from council. They may be involved in recruitment and performance reviews of the FCSS director, and they are vested by council to ensure FCSS programs operate within budget. They also have terms of reference for the board, usually set up through bylaw. The FCSS director is responsible for the day-to-day operations of the program under the direction of the board. They are the key contact and spokesperson for the program, and as such maintain good relationships with all involved parties. They work with the advisory board to develop annual program plans and budgets, and they're responsible for hiring and supervising staff, and a trusted and knowledgeable resource to the advisory board. Okay. So, in managing your FCSS program, the role of the municipality is determining community needs and priorities, which we did through a community needs assessment back in 2017 and should repeat in 2021. We also did a homelessness assessment in 2018, and we're due to repeat that this fall. We should develop a plan to address community needs. Council is responsible for administering the program, or we are collectively. And then there is an annual report, a financial review and audit, and outcomes reporting, all of which were due April 30th. And that's been postponed during COVID, but that's usually when they're due. Okay, there's a little bit about the province's role, but needless to say, primarily it's leadership, setting policy, and advocating for FCSS at the provincial level. So, just go here. So program requirements. So while the key principle of FCSS is local decision making, the program must still make those decisions within the parameters of the FCSS legislation. So this is a little bit of fine print, but bear with me. What did I find my sheet? Okay. So the regulation states that programs must be of a preventative nature that enhance the social well-being of individuals and families through promotion or intervention strategies provided at the earliest opportunity. Section 212 states, services under a program must do one of the following: help people to develop independence, strengthen coping skills, become more resistant to crisis, help people to develop an awareness of social needs, help people to develop interpersonal and group skills which enhance constructive relationships among people, help people and communities to assume responsibility for decisions and actions which affect them, provide supports that help sustain people as active participants in the community. So locally, programs are intended to help individuals in their community to adopt healthy lifestyles, improving quality of life, building capacity to prevent and or deal with crisis situations should they arise. So this really reiterates the provincial expectation that we respond to emergent needs quickly. And if we want to just put it in a nutshell, our mandate, our normal duty, is to determine needs, including emergent needs during crises, and develop programming to address these needs or work with others to do so. Okay, so that just kind of really sums up everything that's in the Act. And then I included a few slides for you that I'm not going to go through in detail, but you have them, which just highlights where we currently do meet each of these things that are outlined as items that we should, as FCSS, be doing. And it's not an exhaustive list provided by the province, it's just examples. Okay. All right. Ineligible services. So it's always important to remember that we cannot fund primarily recreational needs. We cannot offer direct assistance to sustain an individual or family. There has been a slight change to the regulation during COVID that has allowed FCSS to provide financial support to food banks. Whether or not I would make recommendation to council that we do that would be very much dependent on what direction we want to take with FCSS and on the outcome of grants that have been submitted so far. It should not be primarily rehabilitative, and it should not duplicate services already funded by government or other agencies. Also can't include purchase of land or buildings, construction or renos, motor vehicles, costs associated with sustaining an organization that are not directly related to FCSS, property taxes and levies, payment to board members beyond expenses incurred, etc. So if you are looking for any more information about that, these resources outline exactly everything that I've described, and they're available on their website. And what's really handy is in the back of the book, it's got a list of all different kinds of potential programs with examples and whether or not they are eligible. And what's interesting is sometimes it's a yes, but if you do this with it, it's a no. So counseling is a great example of this. The counseling program that we have is not an FCSS program because FCSS could not fund the level of counseling that we provide. FCSS can provide funding for counseling that might be group sessions or universal in nature. But one-on-one counseling for any period beyond maybe 1 or 2 sessions, it's not an FCSS mandate because it's intervention. Okay, so there's a little bit about outcomes and why we measure them. I think we're all clear that the idea of measuring outcomes is so that we know whether things are working and achieving the goals that you set out for in the first instance. So the outcomes identified on the left are those that have been put forward and developed by the province. There is a whole outcome measures process that we follow, and we do report annually to the province on the outcomes that we achieve with our programs. One of the things that we do need to do is ensure that we have program logic models and outcome measures for every single program that we deliver. We're not quite there yet. Okay. So some local examples from 2018. 2019 hasn't been completed yet, but from 2018, Family Fun, we had 1,396 participants and 98.1% experienced positive change. With the Harry Potter Committee, which is a group of youth that got together to plan that event, 100% positive change in terms of feeling that they had been listened to and empowered in the community. Which, if you remember the needs assessment, that was one of the things that we scored quite low in with youth. So just a few facts and figures then. So 99% of Albertans reside in communities where FCSS is available, with just 4,400 not living in a community with FCSS. Oh, I'll just back that up, sorry. So that's the regions that we're broken up into. Okay, and then just a few more facts and figures. So I think the provincial data is nice, but I prefer ours. So in 2018, we had 164 volunteers, which equated to 981.25 hours or $14,718.75 in given time to our programs alone. And in terms of programs, again, nice provincial numbers, but I quite like ours. So there were 17 programs offered directly with 2 funded agencies, 11 jointly funded programs with 4,151 participants in our programs in 2018. And in 2019, we had an 80.7% increase in volunteer hours just for family fun events alone on those numbers. We conservatively estimate that there were 2,000 phone calls, 350 email inquiries, 500 walk-ins, etc. So this brings me to part 2. What are our priorities? So our 2018 to 22 priorities were identified and informed by the 2017 Community Needs Assessment. So just to recap and not go into huge detail, they were affordable, accessible counseling services, affordability and the cost of living, out-of-school activities for older children and youth, welcoming newcomers, housing, transport, an events coordinator because the work was beyond the scope of FCSS. So our planned actions for 2020, based on those, in the community where poverty reduction was a big focus for us. We've joined Tamarack so that they can support us develop a strategy. We're looking at revising the recreation fee assistance policy. We're continuing with the volunteer tax program, enhancing the Let's Connect program, which is the block party and block buddy schemes that we have, the welcome packs for newcomers, that kind of thing. We wanted to research and secure funding to continue to fund CBI programs, being a CBI ceased March 31st of this year. So hence we submitted the FRN application, which was unsuccessful. We wanted to do board development and training, as well as ESS volunteer development. We wanted to enhance our information and referral services, and we wanted to investigate community resource hub, wherein multiple service agencies were in one physical building. And in seniors, we wanted to continue with our existing program and add some intergenerational programming and seniors wellness fair. We were looking at establishing that youth center and regular out-of-school programming and vacation programming in collaboration with others, as well as establishing that youth council and working with the library on this year's Harry Potter event. We wanted to improve efficiency and client experience with a database, program logic models and outcome measures for all of our programs, including our externally funded agencies. We wanted to review funded agency grant process. I wanted to make sure that there was actually an infographic done that highlighted our annual report data, which is some of that data that I've just highlighted to you of how many volunteers we actually have in a year and how many hours that equates to and what the dollar value of that actually is to this community. In terms of emergency social services, we wanted to develop some MOUs and develop volunteers and to have some staff training, as well as updating the ESS portion of the emergency response plan. In addition to those things, there's continued work to reduce social isolation, the tax program, developing programs, developing information and referral I've spoken to, and promoting volunteerism. But then COVID happened. So what we're supposed to do is respond to needs and emergent needs. So we contacted interagency. We hosted an emergency COVID-focused interagency meeting on April 2nd. I also hosted a youth-focused meeting on May 11th. And during those meetings and in our work with clients, we've identified that the following are the priorities right now. So they are food security, mental health and addictions now and in the months to come, transportation to shelter, family violence and housing, children with disabilities, information about supports, access to technology, seniors, youth. They were the priorities. And you know, what's interesting is you can actually fit them quite nicely into what were our 2018 to 22 priorities anyway. I think, yeah, at this point, I just want to speak a little bit to, particularly to the mental health that was identified by everyone that we spoke to as the most significant priority now and in the future. So this is, like, experts are referring to this as a mental health crisis in the making, with depression, trauma, anxiety, suicidal ideation, domestic violence, and child abuse all expected to increase as a result of this pandemic. So we have applied to grants to support in these areas, but I think it's also important to note that under the new FRN system, the family resource workers in our schools did not receive any funding from the province from Children's Services. And so I have recently been informed, and I'm able to share with you today, that as both FRW programs lost funding, the FRW at Green Tree School, the current one, has been permanently laid off or will be as of July 1st. DVSS was 0.8 FTE and an extra 0.2 topped up by the school, which was primarily for their international students. And Green Tree was 0.5. What will happen now instead is that Green Tree School will be dropped to having a 0.4 FTE with the 0.6 at DVSS. So that was one of the reasons for getting the youth group together, people that work with youth and children, to discuss what that means for children and youth, particularly during the summer. It used to be the case that there was an emergency line, that if a family was really struggling over the summer, they could call an FRW and have that conversation and be referred to whatever services they needed to, or just have the conversation with the FRW who'd been working with them throughout the year. Those programs will not be in place this summer. So we're working with the different agencies to consider all the pieces of the puzzle on who's making them fit and who's acting as those pieces. And we pretty much had the puzzle covered because the FRN hub is able to provide some of those services and be that phone call. And we actually developed, FCSS developed a resource that can be shared with families. It's not quite finished, otherwise I would have given it to you, which is Supports for Children, Youth and Families Summer 2020. The only piece that's really missing is an FCSS-shaped piece, which is preventative social programming during the summer. Everything else in terms of mental health, counselling, emergency lines, family violence supports, food security, etc. There are resources available locally that should meet those needs. So what's missing, So what's missing for children and youth is preventative social programming, so FCSS. Okay, so these are the things that we have been doing and that we are proposing to do in those areas. So in terms of food security, and we've submitted grant applications. Wherever you see stars, this is a program that we can only really do if we get grants. And we've included them in grant applications. So supporting hot meal program for vulnerable or low-income seniors. We developed the Community Connections resource, which is online, that connects people that can help with people that need help. We can do referrals to the food bank. We were hoping to support food bank hamper delivery. That's grant dependent. We can support the learning garden. In terms of mental health and addictions, we are looking to increase funding to the community counselling program through RFD here, but also through grants. We applied to the phase 1 funding through the province, but note that phase 1 is not actually therapy, it's more referral and directional. It's only when you get to phase 2 and 3, kind of more in the fall, that there is actually funding available for therapy. Mental health and addictions, it's really important that we do engage youth and seniors at this time, and that's what all of the agencies spoke to. We're providing information on referral. I'm getting an increasing number of phone calls from parents that are starting to really have had it up to here and need help. So obviously providing direction and referrals to them. We wanted to improve social connection and support via revisions to the Block Buddy program and encouraging connections via online resources. And there is an online resource that we can connect with, but again, need the grant to make it so. Transportation to shelter has also been a huge gap, and it's something that we could seek to meet if we were successful. In terms of family violence, we have supported the Salvation Army in the application to the ARDN for emergency housing, and we've also helped through Big Country Anti-Violence Association submit a funding request to Rotary to furnish the family violence shelter that has been proposed. And we're working with BCAVA to get the policies and procedures and funding and communications in place that are needed to be able to open those doors. But it is quite the process. It's not something you want to get wrong. In terms of housing and homelessness, I think it's just fair to say that we need a shelter. We don't have one. The nearest one's far away. The ones that there aren't taking anyone. So we're in a pickle. So we have made that application under ARDN. I am hopeful that we will get something, but no word as yet. If we are successful, what we committed to as a town in kind was 0.5 FTE to develop the needs assessment, intake and referral procedure, which is effectively a first step to a coordinated access system locally and within the surrounding communities. All of those other pieces we would have a hand in, but are mostly led by the Salvation Army. Barrier Reduction Fund, yep. Oh, and then the other thing for us in terms of us actually doing it would be conducting that rural homelessness estimation, and the grant for that has just come out, so we've got to apply for that one now. In terms of children with disabilities, the key issue that was raised by agencies was lack of respite for parents of children with disabilities. And so what we're trying to do is determine what supports are available and share that information with agencies and in the community. And then access to technology. So we are working with Reality Bites and volunteers to refurbish old and unwanted laptops, phones, iPads, etc. for seniors and families in need. It is surprising the number of people that don't have access to a computer, even in this community. And also investigating options for those with limited data. I can sometimes forget that some people don't have unlimited data. And so when they're on Zoom this and Teams that, and the kids are doing this thing for school and that thing for school, suddenly data's gone. Okay, so seniors, again, everything with an asterisk is something we said we could do if we were successful in achieving a grant. The rest of the stuff is stuff that we have been doing and that we are doing. So in terms of those things for the grant we talked about was we're doing wellness checks, but we'd like to enhance them. We'd like to develop online opportunities to engage. We want to develop and distribute activity kits for seniors. We want to think about how we reintegrate seniors into the outside world once they're able to, and reduce fears and phobias that may be associated with that. We're looking at subsidized transport, subsidized housekeeping and yard work, hot meals programs, etc. In terms of youth, the list is also quite significant. So stuff that we have done, we have launched a youth Instagram. We have pretty much finalized the youth centre policies and procedures, should we need them. We were still working on a potential venue and maybe the fundraiser. Asset Development Coalition has kind of taken on the banner of being our charity arm, in the sense that they are applying for charity status so that they can apply for casinos to continue funding the youth project. Who knows when the next casino will be at this point. We did develop a youth survey. Alicia developed a youth survey and included things that we thought we could do online and get youth together to kind of meet that jigsaw piece that was missing from the puzzle. And also get their ideas, because they're way better at thinking of those things than we are. So some examples are there. Right now, we have had responses to those surveys, but we're not able to engage with that right now. We also developed that resource that I described, Supports for Children, Youth and Families, Summer 2020, which will be going out tomorrow. The draft's out for review, and then agencies can just let me know if I made any glaring mistakes. And then summer programming would have been the priority as well. So here are all the grants that we have applied for or been involved in since COVID. So the social services supports for COVID, we applied twice. So we applied once for primarily seniors programming and once for support for families, transport and food security. And we applied in total for just over 100 grand. We got 55,000, just been announced. So we had requested effectively one FTE, acknowledging that we can't do all of those things with existing staff levels. When we had made application for grants, we did speak of increased needs in an already high needs community and stated that increased funding was needed to address those needs. Each of the grants that we submitted includes some in kind, and where possible, we have included requests for funding to increase capacity to deliver new programs. So this is an example of one where we had included the funding for staffing. You will be pleased to know that the Salvation Army also have been successful, partially, in their application to that same grant. It's funny because when we submitted it, we were pretty sure it didn't meet the criteria. In fact, it was definitely didn't meet the criteria, but what do you know? Don't ask, don't get. So they got 7,000. Wheatland County Counselling have not heard back on their application to that, which was to, again, support the therapy and mental health needs of the community. Pregnancy Care Centre hasn't heard back yet. Drumheller Community Learning Society has also not heard back yet from that grant application. The ARDN grant is the one that I spoke to, and just to repeat, so if we were successful in that, the town of Drumheller committed to 0.5 FTE in kind as part of that work. Mental health and addictions grant, phase 1 that we submitted. Again, like I said, we wouldn't get any funding for that. We just supported the application, and the funding would go to Wheatland County Counselling. And the town of Drumheller wasn't actually allowed to make application. It had to be a non-profit. And so we were really thankful that Growing Family Society said they would be the fiscal agent for us for that program. United Way, they received a lot of money to support community agencies, and we are hoping that we're going to get some of that funding primarily for seniors support. We do not know yet how much or when, but we're in the process of those conversations with United Way. As you know, we have had some issues with which United Way are we, but Southeast have said, well, we know you're having issues and technically you're under us, so this time we'll figure it out. So we did submit that funding request to the Rotary for finishing the family violence shelter. Haven't heard back yet. And then the one that we've just heard about and we'll have to get in by June 15th is for the rural homelessness estimation. So all that to say, we're looking for direction. We want to know what council's thoughts are. We'd like to know if we should continue with our plans as outlined to offer preventative social programming that meets identified needs during this crisis and beyond. There are implications for staffing. There are grant implications and donations. And does council have an appetite for further discussion regarding the FCSS structure, the considerations of having a board, reporting expectations, whether we should reconsider funded agencies or a grant call for proposals or anything else. And are there other things that council would like FCSS to work on at this time? And then, is it worth, as council right now is the board for FCSS, is it worth establishing quarterly board meetings so that I'm not talking at you for half an hour on occasions like this? And is there anything else? That's all I've got for now. Thank you.
All right, thank you, April. Who wants to start? Tom, go ahead.
First of all, I really like the logo.
Oh, I meant to say, oh man, thank you for pointing that out. Yeah. Do you like it? I like it. I think it's great.
Who came up with that? That looks
Well,
great.
so we utilized some of the remaining Aviva funding for this because we wanted the FCSS logo to speak to the new brand, but at the same time, we do have to keep in keeping with the fact that it's a grant from the province, and so we have to still brand anything that's FCSS funded with the FCSS logo, but we wanted it to speak to unique Drumheller's brand. So that's where it came from.
Yeah, I like it.
Launched tonight, folks.
So I've got a few questions. First of all, do we know why and how the town got FCSS? Like
Why?
Well, FCS doesn't have to be under a town mandate. I mean, it can be a separate entity. Do you have any idea of why the town got into the FCSS business?
It is always a municipality that has to apply. However, the municipality can then, and occasionally there are a couple of instances in the province, they can then choose to provide that funding to a non-profit agency whose focus is set up entirely to run FCSS. So Stellar is an example, right? But the municipality is still responsible for ensuring that that money is spent as it ought to be. And council would still ultimately oversee the budget and approve it on an annual basis, even in Stellar.
So it could be a separate entity, but not.
It could be a separate entity. There are advantages and disadvantages to each of the setups. And I think one of the greatest disadvantages of an entirely separate entity is less money available for programming because more money is being spent on rent, potentially.
Okay. The 80-20 funding, so 80% comes from the province. And like, how do they determine that? Do we send them what we want? Or they just come up with 80 and then we come up with a 20? How did, like...
So the calculation is based on population size, and it includes a bit of a math calculation around median or median income in the community as well. So that's what it's based on, how much we get.
So every year that 80 is set, but the 20 isn't necessarily. Like we come up with the 20 council budget, but we can increase that or decrease that.
No, in order for us to have an FCSS, you have to pay the 20%. You can choose to pay more.
Yes. So yeah, you talked about this idea of the FCSS board. I mean, we have lots of boards. They do lots of things.
Yep.
I'm not sure if I understood what the possible advantage there might be to have an FCSS board.
I guess there are a number of advantages to an FCSS board, in the sense that they can be involved in policy development. They're a lot more actively, I guess, involved and more hands-on in operating FCSS. If there's a board, they meet monthly at least, and are provided with updates on progress. They're involved in the development of 5-year plans. They're involved in all of those things. So the other advantage is that it allows members of the community to be involved in that process, as opposed to only council. These are some of the advantages.
Most boards also do a lot of fundraising.
Yeah.
Okay. So I'm very distressed at the family resource worker situation. From my experience in schools, family resource workers are incredibly valuable, work very hard. They work with the most challenging families and the most challenging students. And I'm very distressed at this constant erosion of cutting back on the family resource workers. So I would really like to address that somehow and get that back to where it needs to be.
So I guess a couple of things on that. One, I was supposed to read this out to you. So this is from Dave Watson. He says, please let council know that I have appreciated the support of the FCSS program over my 15 years at Green Tree, and it has been an honour and privilege to work with and serve the over 500 individuals and families of Green Tree and Drumheller. So I said that I would share that. And I guess the other thing is two things. So one, as I've said, FCSS cannot fund counselling. And according to family resource workers, the majority of their time is spent providing counselling. The funding that we provide through FCSS is for the universal programming and group programs that they offer. We cannot fund one-on-one in the way that they offer it. So there is that. And the other thing to remember is that because the province has chosen to fund the FRN in the way that it has, the expectation is therefore on the FRN to provide services. And that's what the school divisions are looking to now to meet those gaps. Whether they are going to be able to, I cannot answer that. But that's the expectation moving forward.
Yeah, and policy is nice and regulations are nice, and then when you see these people working in a school with some of these families that are totally outside the box, and they go to, they're in midnight, in crisis situations, all the policy and guidelines and what you should do and shouldn't do, to me, just goes right out the window. These people provide an incredibly exceptional service to the most needy, and all I'm saying is we got to work on this with the school divisions, with the town, with whatever, because I see it as just an absolute crime if we can't make it work somehow. Anyways, on to my next thing. How has your FCSS been impacted by the demise of victim services? And have you had to kind of up the ante there somehow?
We're definitely getting phone calls. So one of the primary functions of FCSS is information and referral. We're known as that, so if people aren't quite sure, they typically call us. And so the answer that we have right now is that the RCMP is providing victim services supports, but they don't provide court support. However, Association of Communities Against Abuse can, in certain instances, provide that. So that's the kind of referrals that we're providing. We have spent quite a lot of time on the phone just trying to figure out exactly what happened with victim services and if there is any funds remaining. Because it is the case that they received a provincial grant, and we know that that grant was returned, but they also had a thrift store in Oyen and did significant fundraising in the community through the year, and it was that fundraising actually that paid for hotel rooms for people that were homeless or fleeing a family violence situation. And it was that funding that paid for Impact Day and various other pieces. And so we're not quite sure whether that funding is somewhere that we could maybe harness through Big Country Anti-Violence Association and use it to support victims. I'm not sure. That's something that we're looking into. But certainly I would say that this community is hurting for not having one. Yeah.
My last kind of comment question, how does the Alzheimer's support group that was in partnership with DDSF, is that part of FCSS, or that's Alberta Health, or you don't have any part of that, even though that's kind of a valuable thing for seniors, some seniors? So
there were a couple of programs. There was a support group that a lady in the community established, and we provided her support by referrals and that kind of thing. But then there was also the program where we worked with AHS, the PCN. They came here and presented, and we did partner with them on that program, which was a dementia daycare program. So we did partner with them on that program. Rose was very involved in that program. So there were two things.
Anybody else, Jay?
Thanks for the presentation, April. How long have you been in your current role?
I think it's 4 years.
And so help me understand what's changed. What's the impetus for tonight's report? What's, approaching council as a board to be consulted with is certainly, to me, in the 10 years I've been doing this, a reframing of how I feel I've ever been approached, and direct consultation with us regarding community priorities while they've been identified through different means. This feels very, very different in how this has been framed, and I need to understand what's changed.
Well, I think of a few things. I think it's really important to, as I become more and more aware of FCSS and how FCSS works and how it works elsewhere, I think it's really that without the direction of the board, whatever that is, if we go off and do something that the board wasn't quite sure that we were doing or hadn't been on the same page with, that can lead to differences of opinion. And so I think it's really important that we're all on the same page and we know what FCSS's goals are and how we're planning to achieve them. So I think that the youth project may be an example of where some things may have been lost in translation. And so I'm just trying to make sure that we avoid that moving forward. So I think that's one thing.
Good answer.
Thanks. And then the other is that this is like a time like no other, right? So this is a circumstance where the needs of this community are gonna increase. And we know that that's coming. All of the research, all of the experts are telling us that the needs are gonna increase. And it's not right now, although they have increased now, but it's coming, and this wave of need is coming. And so how we are gonna respond to that as FCSS and the direction that we're gonna take, I think that's a conversation, again, that we should be having collectively if you are the board, which you are right now.
Mm-hmm.
So,
thank you. In direct relation to the family violence portion, shelter space was clearly identified in your chart as something in blue. In other words, not under the mandate of FCSS. So can you square that circle for me about your involvement in the
So in the
project?
same way as counseling is not in FCSS's wheelhouse, advocacy is. So really, the extent to which FCSS would be involved in establishing a shelter would be advocacy or supporting an agency that's actually doing the work. That's where the line would be for FCSS. Yeah.
Okay, thank you for the clarification. More of a comment to council. Especially as it relates to the Family Resource Worker Program. I think, as always, especially in this time where we've now, in some ways, let the genie out of the bottle. We've stepped outside of what are traditional municipal jurisdictions by a mile during this crisis, and it's frankly unsustainable. There's only so much money. There is no provincial support coming, in my opinion, and so trying very desperately to fix all the holes caused by the current provincial government and their funding cuts is a ridiculous proposal that the municipality should then take on that and wear all those things. Who cut the funding? The province of Alberta. Who can restore that funding? The province of Alberta. This is an advocacy issue with our MLA. The idea that somehow the town of Drumheller would now foot that bill, it would be downloading in its very definition. So I would not, even though I absolutely agree the program is critical, there are people to account for the damage caused by the cut to this program, it is not the town of Drumheller. And fourth, I would say that we need time to digest this, April. When you say you're looking for direction, I hope you mean over the next several weeks. Because if it's for tonight, the answer is I won't answer because I'm not prepared to. I got the information that sometime this afternoon.
Anybody else? Okay, Fred, go ahead.
Jay, you picked up some of my points. Definitely the offloading is a concern. And over the report, I kept, from my short time on council, kept seeing little things that are cracks appearing that point towards us doing more and more, or assume that we're going to do more and more. And I'm as concerned as the rest of council with the effects of COVID, the budget coming up, and I think that there's a lot of pieces in the puzzle that have to come together, along with your report, April, to decide where we're going. And I would agree with Jay. I don't think it's something that can be done quickly, because there's other pieces of the puzzle that have to come in place first.
Lisa?
So first off, I just want to say that the organization is very blessed to have you at the helm. You are, just by even this presentation, a very capable person, and I hope everybody appreciates what we have. But could you go back to that last slide? Yeah, so I too felt how Jay felt, like it just felt there was not just a request for direction, but a completely different change in direction in your presentations from recent. So it was nice to hear some of that clarification on that. I'm also disturbed by some of your first opening comments in regards to FCSS being called fluff. It is such an integral part to this community from the work that you guys do that I was kind of shocked by hearing that. But yeah, one of the questions I had written down is it broken? Is that what you were hinting at in regards to how the system is put together for FCSS in our community?
I don't know that it's broken. I think that it's incumbent upon the FCSS director to come back to it every once in a while and look at, do we have the best structure? Would it be worth involving community members in this process? What is our focus? What are our priorities? They should be informed by social research, and that's what we've done. That's what we started to do. But how we work and how we discuss them and how we implement them, I think that is something that we should be looking at regularly to see if there is opportunity for enhancement and development. And in terms of what else has changed and direction, whilst I recognize that this is a lot to take in, and so when council members come to the FCSS AA conference in November, whomever comes this year, if it runs or it's online or next year, this course, FCSS 101, is available. And not only that, but they can come and they can provide this training to board members as needed. So this was a relatively quick go through it, but I think it's actually really valuable training for everyone that's on a board for FCSS. And in terms of, so yes, I think there are things that are going to take some time to think about and come up with a plan for, but we did just receive $55,000 from the government, and their expectation is that we start using it pretty quick. So in terms of how we decide from these are the things we said we could do if we had 100,000 and 1 FTE extra on top of our normal staffing. Now we have 55, we've just under half of that. So deciding which of those programs we prioritize, that's something that you can leave in the hands of the team. We can do that. But again, you have to decide that that's what you want to do. You have to say, make those decisions. Or, no, actually, we want to take some time and we want to think about that as your board.
Some good insight there. So personally, you live and breathe every single day. I live and breathe insurance. So in my own opinion, I'd rather give you the freedom to do what you know needs to be done. And that's my stance on that.
Thanks.
So, but regardless, yeah, I'm going to take quite some time to digest everything that was presented tonight, because there was an overwhelming amount of information. So again, thank you.
Christine?
Yeah, actually, what you just said there, I think Lisa heard me be like, yeah, because it totally made sense. Yes, you know way more than I do too about all this, and the studies and everything you guys have done. Like, you guys know what the community needs more than I do. So, thank you for coming in, and yeah, it's going to be a big document to digest for sure.
Oh, go ahead, Fred.
Sorry, April, when with COVID as an ad hoc kind of event in our lives, do you then take the hierarchy of needs and start at the bottom and say food, shelter, clothing, and that's where you would start spending the 55? We're not going to go into forming policy on a youth coordinated program when there's people that aren't eating or have no place to live or have no clothes. Like, where would that money fit in on that?
So it's interesting. So Maslow's hierarchy of needs. Basic needs are at the bottom: food, clothing, shelter, right? So FCSS doesn't do those things. We're not allowed to provide one-to-one support. So on this rare occasion, the province has shifted the legislation for now only, that if we choose to, we could fund food banks. But they had to change the regulation to allow us to do that, because under normal circumstances, FCSS doesn't do the base level of the hierarchy of needs. However, what we do a lot of is supporting social needs, prevention, and so mental health supports, advocating for them and putting them in place. That is a big piece of this, providing opportunities for people to socialize, not be isolated, not become lonely. That's where FCSS gets involved. And I would argue that to an extent, that's got to be a basic need. It's not so on Maslow's hierarchy. And I guess the other point on that is I have a really interesting document from Wheatland County Counselling, which, again, should I present an RFD for increase to counselling funds, I would present this to you guys too. But what she speaks to is, so right now, requests for counselling dropped completely. Why? Because people are focusing on base level hierarchy of needs. They're like, can we eat? Do we have a roof over our heads? And also, if I'm in a family violence situation, I'm in a fishbowl right now. How am I picking up the phone and having a conversation with a counsellor about the abuse that I'm currently experiencing? So what's expected is that while there's been a drop right now, there's going to be a surge as people are allowed to go back to work, as children go back to school, etc. And those opportunities to be alone or to come to terms, I suppose, with the trauma, this is considered a collective trauma experience, is realized by community members. So.
Go ahead, Jay.
If I can, Your Worship, does anybody else have anything? Going back to the FRN, that stands for Family Resource Network. So would you be our liaison then with McMahon Youth Services?
Yeah, so they are now on interagency calls with us on a monthly basis. We are working with them directly. They run the youth call that we had recently. They, I guess of note, the director of that program is Amber Channel. She was the FSLW, Family School Liaison Worker at St. Anthony's for many years. So they've done very well in hiring her as a local resource with lots of knowledge of the needs and issues within this community as their director right now. And they've also got Benita Hudson as a member of staff as well, who is heavily involved in leading the Parent Link program in this community too. So a couple of great staff there.
Excellent. So if Council thinks it's appropriate, I would imagine that a presentation to Council from those people on the role they're going to play, the gaps they're going to fill, how they're going to go about providing the family resource piece of the puzzle that's been removed. Those would all be pieces of information I think council would like to know about post haste. Shall we have them as a delegation?
I can absolutely, so interagency is tomorrow, so I will absolutely have that conversation and see how quickly they're able to do that.
If council is in agreement. And lastly, so just to focus my thoughts for the next few days, April, what would the 55K, what were the high priority items to be considered as to how we might reallocate those funds?
Yeah, so engaging with vulnerable community members, so seniors, youth, or whatever age group they happen to be in. Considering maybe some home delivery of hot meals was one of the items. Oh man, I'd have to just scoot back here.
Yep.
Sorry. Improving our telephone wellness checks. Rose has been doing a great job with that with her known clients, but we haven't advertised it. So if we advertised it, that was available, we'd likely see an increase in demand for it. So we didn't want to do that until we maybe had some more staff to make it so. Online engagement opportunities. We wanted to develop some activity kits that we could deliver to seniors so that they could either just do them by themselves because they'd have instructions, or if we can get computers to them or they already have computers, Rose or whomever could lead like an online let's do this together kind of thing, even though they're in their own homes. Subsidized housekeeping / yard work. We do have the handyman program, but we were looking to enhance that and extend it potentially to include housekeeping services and various other similar things.
Okay, thank you. It's what Councillor Hassan-Zakharuk and Councillor DeMott were referring to, and so I need to, as a council, we have low qualifications in the helping professions, and so the idea of providing direct, I worry about our capabilities, our qualifications to do so. I also worry about the potential for those decisions to become political. At the same time, I'm torn with broadening the board structure to include more representation of the different helping professions in the community and community managers at large. And my reason for saying that, April, comes from our collective experience with the anti-poverty group. My impression only, but my impression of those organizations and the saints that support them all is that they're all overtasked, they're all under-supported, they're all without the level of decision-making authority that they require. And to ask those people to then sit on one more board, it's just, I wonder about capacity when it comes to that part as well. Obviously, they're the most well-informed people. Obviously, they would be able to provide expertise and support, and maybe should have a voice. But again, what's the point of if your board is too overtaxed to support or too ill-informed to support? It's still the same problem. So I'm going to need to think about that for a while. Thank you.
All right, anybody else? Okay, I got a few questions, April. I'm looking at just even your third slide here, and you've got FCSS, then you've got Events Business Unit. Were we not rolling that through the recreation, or is that just food for thought? And then the community counseling, when you asked me about helping you when you were trying to apply for that whole big program, I started doing a ton of work on FCSS so I could understand. And I've been in contact with about 12 communities so far. And so first of all, FCSS did not get, no funding was That was the one program, there was no funding cuts. So let's just, everybody understand that. The province didn't cut any funds there. However, what they did create was this hub and spoke program. And this is where I guess I'm a little confused, because in that includes the Healthy Families, Triple Parenting, Parent Lane, Growing Opportunities, Children with Disabilities, and the Family Resource Network. So I'm not sure that it's completely cut as it is. As from what I'm figuring out is McMahon's still trying to figure out where all their funding is going. So I'm not sure that I agree, and whether, that's if they do come back and present that, then I guess we'll get some more information. As well as I've been trying to figure out from our strategic plan and how FCSS fits into it. The youth program, which was under community development, which was number one, I thought we had kind of said that we weren't, council didn't agree with the center. But you keep talking about it, so I'm just throwing this out there. I thought that we had done that. And as well, the advanced coordinator proposal, obviously that's on the back burner now with COVID because we don't have. And then the poverty reduction short-term initiatives, I've got on here done, so I'm not sure exactly there. And then there's client database, which I'm not sure what that is. And as well as the funding application forms, which it sounds like you've applied for a lot of funding. So I guess I just want to make sure that FCSS, the 20% that the municipality is giving, is tying in with our strategic plan. So that's food for thought. And I'm doing the same to you. You give us a lot of information, I'll give you lots, and then we can see where we're at. What does FOL stand for?
Festival of Lights.
Okay, all right. So then I go to, when I look at this community counseling and stuff like that, because there is a wheatland crossing that's working in Riverside Medical as well as that building, and then we have McMahon now is working in the old AHS building, and I kind of heard rumor that FCSS is thinking of working out of there. I'm not sure if that's something you're working on. I just kind of heard that, so maybe that can kind of come back into play here. You had mentioned that you're in contact with Starland. Have you just talked to them recently? Because I know they've been reaching out to me. So just as long as you guys are making that connectivity, because I think because Diana no longer is there due to health reasons or retirement, that they want to connect so that they can collaborate with us. So I just want to throw that out there. And then so there's, and I have, like I say, I've been talking to 12 different municipalities, so I'm really trying to understand how some work and how some, and you're absolutely right, they all kind of have different ways of they do it. But out of 12 I spoke to, 10 of them don't work out of town hall because it's like family communities, if they're coming to get support, they're not going to walk into town hall, go through 3 locked doors and get help. So what the ones that did though, however, they, and a couple of them, like one, for example, of all her funding, she kept $22,000 for her within, and they did small things like, life skills programs. They did movers and groovers for seniors and, kind of different things like that. However, the rest of it, they did fund to things like the support to schools and to different programs. And they created a grant arm. So then that basically helped fund those programs so that they weren't all tripping over each other. So I learned a lot, and I guess sometimes knowledge is powerful and knowledge is dangerous. So I'm not sure if I'm dangerous or I'm knowledgeable right now. But I just think that some of the things that they explained to me, like, for example, we talked about domestic violence and stuff like that. They said, like, that's completely a different funding arm, nothing to do with FCSS. So I guess there is a lot to learn in which direction to go, because, you know, some of them are nonprofit organizations and societies, because they can get grant funding that through FCSS working under the municipality. We can't get those funds because they have to be a nonprofit or society. So that's definitely something to look at. You know, the interagency is big on just about everybody I spoke to. And so when you talk about creating a board, if it's going to be a board of interagency, and maybe, I know every one of us have a ton of boards to sit on already, but, you know, that's maybe something to look at, because, you know, maybe there is chance of more grants, but obviously it has to be completely disconnected in a sense from the municipality. Like, they're separate run organizations, I guess, is how they're doing it. So yeah, there's a lot that's I'm curious with Rose, because she's the seniors coordinator. Is that funded through FCSS, or is that funded through the municipality?
It's 100% FCSS.
100% FCSS. Okay. And then I guess the other thing on the youth, and a lot of it that came up with different, most of them don't have youth centers that I spoke to, but they talked about, so few of them talked about this youth action committee, and you had up there a youth council. And I think, and it was really drilled into me by most of them, that if the youth aren't going to lead the charge, they're not going to listen to adults. So I think it's something that I'd really like to really be careful and see how we're going forward on this youth, because this youth center, because I think, or am I confused? Did I miss something? Did we agree to go forward on the youth center, or did I miss something? Right, a pilot, but we're not, like, a not actual, like, wasn't it? I thought we had talked about that she was going to spend that money that you guys had raised and have activities for youth going on around town, like you had board games one night, bowling, and we were going to use all the different halls and venues and the VCF and everything we had. So I think we as council, because, like, it said it was going to be $80,000 to $100,000 a year to fund that, and I was under the impression that that wasn't what the direction what council was going. So I think we just need to be clear, because that is one thing that we don't seem to be clear on, or I'm not clear on. So
Yeah, when I left that last discussion about that, it was, we'll support a pilot, and that was the direction that I walked away with. So that's the work that we were undertaking, and that was initially, we had a contract ready to go with the one venue, and then that fell through because they lost their minister, right? And then, so since then, we have been looking at different venues to host, because we had talked about the issues with not having dedicated space and not being able to make it their own, and like all of that kind of stuff. So that's the stage that we were at with a youth space, in terms of establishing a pilot to have in 2020.
okay, well, I think we as council better have more discussion on that, because I think that we're obviously, or else maybe I'm misunderstanding, but that was, if that's the case, we're already halfway through the year, and by the time you get set up, it's going to be the end of that term. So I think council better think about that one for the next discussion as well. Oh, go ahead, Christine.
So even if we were to get something, we probably wouldn't be able to open it for a very long period of time before our facilities are stage
Well, that's
three.
stage 3. So that, I mean, we could see stage 3 in possibly September, maybe later. So again, if we go into all that work and then it's up, I think it's something that And I think that's where, you know, the working really close, like I did that tour of DVSS and I had suggested that you and Daryl reached out and then COVID hit, because I think there's a lot out there as long as it's with the library and different things. So anyways, that's my opinion on that. And oh, and then other thing on McMahon, I guess that opened up from 0 to 18 now, so it's not just 0 to 5 on a lot of that stuff. So that's huge, because again, that's where a lot of that youth.
But they don't do preventative social programming. So I think it's really, yes, 0 to 18 is their mandate, but it's not preventative social
No, but
programming.
yours is preventative.
That's right.
Theirs is the next. So they're there to
Yes.
continue. Yeah.
Yes.
Okay, well, I think,
And I guess I can respond to the point around a hub. So when we applied to the FRN, as the hub, we had said this would be a great opportunity with funding from the province to establish a hub with multiple agencies in one physical space. So we had looked at the AHS building and a couple of other places. So we were unsuccessful, but McMahon got it. Same thing. They're thinking, they got the AHS building and they're like, can we bring agencies together into this one space? So in order for us to be able to do that, though, we would have to find the money to pay for rent out of our FCSS budget. So something would have to give to make that so.
yeah, I think it's just, again, you know, it's something worth exploring, because again, if families can go
One
to one
space.
space and
Perfect.
feel safe,
Yes.
because I know that it was mentioned, the Riverside Medical Building, but it's kind of, that's tough too, because that's usually Child Protective Services,
Yeah.
right? So, you know, people don't want that always to feel they have that association. So I think, yeah, you've got a lot of homework to do, and there's pros and cons to being together, but I think at the same time, you know, if we're going to this about the families, and if we can make it more convenient for the families, it's food for thought. So yeah, my feeling is, just because it's done the same way for 10 or 15 years doesn't mean, as one mayor tells me, if it's not working, blow it up, and if it's working, just to try and enhance it and make it better. So I think that's all we're saying is, let's work together and see how we can make it better for the whole community. So well done. Anybody else? Okay, we shall move forward. Thank you, April. Thank you, Laura, for being here. And good job, ladies. So I shall move on to, I'm going to get, just for the viewing public, we're now going into closed meeting. We are discussing COVID and all the emergency operations under section 18(1)B. So could I get a motion to go into camera, please? Christine, second. Lisa? All in favor? Carried.